Time is ticking on peak tomato season, my friends, so today we're going to walk through the method that I use to create my perfect BLT, and I'll meet you guys back here in just a couple minutes for the taste test, but first, let's break it down.
Though it has 3 letters, the BLT is actually 5 components. You have the bacon, the lettuce, and the tomato, then you have the bread and the mayonnaise. And while all sandwiches made with these components are still probably going to taste good, my perfect BLT is created by treating it like a burger. Let's talk tomatoes. Like others before me have said, the BLT is truly a tomato sandwich. It is about capturing those slightly acidic and sweet juices of a ripe tomato between 2 pieces of bread. However, I'll go one step further and say a BLT is actually a burger, except instead of a beef patty being the star, it is a thick, juicy slice of tomato with some bacon on top. This means I want a single layer of tomatoes, preferably at least a 1/4 inch thick, and this yields a juicy bite that only a truly delicious summertime tomato can deliver. Also, since they are in a single layer, we won't get that tomato slide out. Now, regarding tomato types, if you can find them, I highly recommend picking up some heirloom tomatoes at your local farmer's market. These are by far my favorite tomatoes from a taste and texture perspective. And while they don't yield pretty slices, you can custom cut those so the thick slices cover the sandwich from edge to edge. Also, do make sure you salt and pepper them about 10 minutes ahead of time, which will release some excess moisture and intensify those flavors. For assembly, you just want to treat the tomatoes like a big juicy beef patty as the center piece of the sandwich. Now, you may be asking, how does the bacon fit in? For me, the role of bacon is to provide 1, a crisp texture, and 2, a smoky and salty flavor. My one thing to nail is to make sure that bacon is crisp. It should easily be able to be crunched in a bite instead of pulling the whole slice out of the sandwich. And while this can be done on the stove, if you have the time, I think it does work much better in the oven at around 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 minutes, so that fat can slowly render out and the bacon can get truly crisp. Regarding bacon flavor, I want there to be enough bacon so I know it's there, but for me, while some of these things may be delicious, I do not prefer to toast my bread in bacon fat or make a bacon mayo because it kind of takes away from the tomato. Remember, it's basically a tomato burger with bacon on top. Now before we get to the bread and the mayo, let's talk about the L, the lechuga, the lettuce. And there is a time and a place for microgreens, arugula, or spinach, but the BLT is not one. Look for a mild tasting lettuce like buttercrunch, romaine, or iceberg, and the lettuce is there to provide a refreshing crunch as you chew through the sandwich. I prefer mine very thinly sliced, and then I like to very lightly dress it with a mix of mayo and acid, in this case, pickled onion liquid. Then I just drizzle that over the top of the lettuce and toss it together. And this provides a little bit of extra lubrication to the sandwich, as well as it disperses some of those flavors throughout the lettuce. And make sure you dress this right away before serving because it can wilt fast. Now, let's talk about the other 2 ingredients that didn't make the acronym, the mayonnaise and the bread. Now, while mayo is incredibly easy to make at home, I'm lazy most of the time, so I just utilize some Kewpie mayo, and the one rule I have with mayo is just make sure you use enough. For me, this is in the lettuce like I just mentioned. Then I also like to use it to toast one side of the bread to provide a fat barrier to the juices of the sandwich, and it also is a little bit milder in flavor compared to butter or bacon fat in my opinion. Finally, let's finish with the bread. As I mentioned in my sandwich video, great sandwiches cannot be made without great bread, and the BLT is no exception. For the bread, I want a soft but sturdy sandwich bread. And for my perfect BLT, this means I'm making my own sandwich bread. For this particular version, I followed my sandwich bread recipe, but just used 20% whole wheat flour because I was in the mood for it. And this yields a slightly denser crumb with plenty of structural integrity to stand up to the juiciness of the tomatoes. Now, I personally stay away from sourdough slices because they are too tangy and crusty, and while it has become popular in the past couple of years, I'm completely against the notion of using plain white bread from mega brands like Wonder or Sara Lee. These store-bought white breads are generally sliced way too thin and always fall apart before I'm done eating the sandwich. Now, if you do go the store-bought route, try to find a bread that's a little bit thicker, like a potato bread or an Italian white bread, because really ripe tomatoes have a ton of liquid in them, and the best part about making your own is that you can control the density of the bread itself and how thick you make the slices. Speaking of, it's time to assemble. For assembly, I heavily toast the interior slices of bread, and then the exterior I just leave lightly toasted so it's still a little bit soft. Next, I hit one piece of bread with a very thin layer of mayo, and then toss the dressed romaine or iceberg onto the other piece. I also drizzle a little bit of those tomato juices that came out from salting them ahead of time, and then I custom cut the heirloom tomato pieces to fit perfectly in one thick layer from edge to edge of the bread. Don't worry, those leftovers make a really tasty snack. Next, hit it with the crispy bacon in a single layer over the tomatoes before adding that top piece of bread. You slice it in half, and we have those thick, juicy tomatoes waiting for us. Taste test time.
All right, let's dive into this thing. I've been salivating. I wasn't even gonna make this video initially, but then I figured what better way to send off this kitchen than with one of my favorite summer sandwiches, the BLT. Let's dive in. Okay, so I had to stop myself before I quite literally ate the rest of the sandwich, but every component is doing exactly what I want them to do. So first off, the bread. It's sturdier than like a white bread. Like if I had used Wonder Bread, this thing has been sitting around for probably 5 or 10 minutes. This thing would have been falling apart by the time I actually got to eat it if I'd used like a very thin and weak white bread. But instead, we've got a slightly sturdier whole wheat sandwich bread, a little bit thicker slices, and just toasting it on the outside helps create that kind of boundary so it doesn't soak in there. Then next up, we have the bacon. It's not overpowering, but you notice it in the bites there, right? Like I don't want bacon mayo, I don't want bacon toasted bread. That's just like too much bacon. It kind of takes away from the star of the show, which that is the thick tomato slices in there. You know, like 1/3 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, I forget how many centimeters that is. But those juicy, like bite into your teeth slices, like you don't get that any other time of year except during summer. And just making sure you're seasoning them ahead of time. They're so juicy, it's so satisfying, even though, you know, it's a tomato. It's not meat, but it's so satisfying. And then rounding it out, the romaine lettuce, or you use iceberg, dressed up, I think is the best way to kind of incorporate that little bit of fat in there, get you a little bit more moisture in the sandwich. And I really like that. And if you are doing that, I would recommend doing it right at the end, dressing it right at the end. Don't let it sit around or else those greens will, you know, quickly kind of sog up. But this is my perfect BLT. It's juicy, it's delicious. It's very simple ingredients, but just crafted the way that, you know, me personally, how I like them. I know there's lots of opinions on BLTs out there, but this is my perfect BLT. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Next video after this will be in the new kitchen. A lot of cool stuff will be happening this fall. We're kind of gonna get after it. You know, it's gonna be a little weird in the next few weeks, but we'll get right back on track. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace, y'all.